Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day for this QIP program on 4D printing for smart manufacturing. Uh, I, on behalf of Mechanical Engineering Department, NITR Chandigarh, welcome you all for this program. For today discussion, we will be having three talks. The first session I will take on the some basics and research aspect of 3D and 4D printing. The second session, which will be at 12 noon, will be taken by Professor Arun Nand, who is the renowned veterinary surgeon, and he is using these additive manufacturing 3D printing excessively for the printing of the dental crowns uh, for the domestic animals as well as for the wild animals, and he has a lot of elaborated work specifically for the zoo animals. Then the third session, which will be post lunch, something around 2:30, that will be taken by Mr. Vivek Chaudhary, who is the application engineer from Materialize Malaysia, and that talk will be on the complete software suite for 3D printing. So this is the whole day discussion that we will be making. So this first session that I am going to start will be for some of the beginners who have some little information about the 3D printing and 4D printing, and we want to use it for development of some useful product. So with this introduction, let us start the proceeding for today. I'm just going to share my screen. Is this screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Sir, can we
great.
click on the hide button as well?
Yeah. So I think we can start if everything is done. So this particular discussion is mainly focused on the 3D and 4D printing, which we are taking as a future for the manufacturing. Before I start about the 3D and 4D part, some basic information that I want to share with you why we are interested in this. These are some of the signature slides that we used to, show to all the participants so that they should understand that why this is being required, right? So if you see, as per the Niti Yog, despite numerous plan on paper, the manufacturing never took off in a meaningful way, and the contribution of this sector is stagnant around 15% in the GDP of the country from the last 30 years. This is the observation pre-COVID period. And if you compare the country like China, which is just neighbor to us, the contribution of the manufacturing sector is 34%. So as per the Niti Yog website, there seems to be some large policy failure at our level. The problem is not new. Government of India is working on this problem since long, and to address this issue, in 2004, Government of India set up a National Manufacturing Competitive Council, which was basically governed by some group of ministers. In 2006, the Prime Minister of India also showed his concern for increasing the contribution of the manufacturing sector, and it was planned that it must be increased from 12 to 14% to 25 to 35%. And if you see the Niti Yog website, by 2025, the target set is 25% for the contribution of the manufacturing sector. Not only the government is saying, but even some private sector people and some public sector people, they are also enforcing the same way that we must increase the contribution of the manufacturing sector in the GDP of the country. These targets seems to be, unachievable in some cases because of the uh, some of the constraints, like we have a problem with the labor laws, we have a problem with the, land acquisition, we have a problem with the infrastructure, we have a problem with the finance, right? And there are many bills which, of course, as per the law of land, are yet to be cleared, and all these things basically restrict the some, investor in a business, and we basically have a bottleneck, right? So to address this issue, there was a seminar which was organized jointly by Government of Andhra and CII, and it was concluded that the solution for these type of problems is the innovation in the product and the process, and it can be the key driver for the success in the manufacturing sector. Now, this is the actual point from where our discussion will start. We are interested in some innovation. That innovation may be in the product, that innovation may be in the process, and if we are able to do this, we are able to launch the product first, and we will have a lion's share in the market. Right? It is reported that there are many other services, but their contribution in the economy is not that much. So this is the another report that I want to share with you. This is as per Thomson Reuters. What it says, the engineering contribution in research by India was around 4.3% in 1981, which was reduced to 2.2% in 1995, and it was again improved to 4.25% in 2010. And presently, if you see in 2021, as per Thomson Reuters report, this is nowadays called Clarivate Analytics, taken up by Clarivate Analytics, this is again less than 5%. But if you compare the contribution in engineering research by countries like China, Korea, Taiwan, that is better than us. Similarly, sometimes we say that India is good in software part, something like that. But again, at international level, the contribution is again quite low. So these are some of the realistic pictures that I want to share with you before I start a discussion on 3D printing. The basic idea is that as a technocrat, we have to improve the contribution of the engineering research so that for launching some product, India may have a lion's share in the market. That is the idea. So one of the way to go for innovation, to come up with an innovative product, to come up with an innovative process, is the use of the 3D printing, right? So this particular picture that is coming in front of us in the screen, this I have taken from Chang and Chua paper 2005, Journal of Advanced Manufacturing Technology. What it says, the rapid prototyping, which is another name for additive manufacturing. Commonly we say that this is a synonym, but it is actually not, is basically categorized into three parts. So one is called additive, another is called subtractive, and third is a combination of additive or subtractive. So under additive, there can be technologies which are based upon liquid, there can be technologies which are based upon powder, there can be technologies which are based upon sheet as a raw material. If you really talk about the subtractive way of manufacturing, then CNC machining, CNC, DNC is quite common. And as a typical mechanical engineer, we are really comfortable with the use of these type of the machining methods. Then, of course, we are always interested in the process optimization, in the reduction of the cost. So, what we say that in coming 5 years or 10 years, the additive and subtractive manufacturing process will move hand in hand. So, this is the combination of additive and subtractive is of course required. So, there can be some processes which are using some part as a additive and some part as a subtractive method. So specifically, as this course is on the additive part, so we will be focusing on it. So it is further based upon liquid-based technologies, powder-based technologies, or sheet-based technologies. And under these subcategories, there are many commercial technologies available. If you just see commercially, there are 30 plus these type of technologies, which may include photopolymers, which may include molten metal, which may include this thermoplastic or inkjet binding, something like that. So 30 plus commercial technologies are available. The idea for discussion in this lecture is not to explain a particular technology, but how to make a technology indigenous, how to customize some of the properties with the material, and how to make this in-house and low cost. That is the idea for discussion in this course. So just for the beginners, the 3D printing, it looks like a photocopier machine. I have something in the CAD file. So that CAD data goes to the printer. So printer is printing the part and I am getting the product in 3 dimensions. So what I can say, RP is a fabrication method where the physical objects we can basically construct by layer manufacturing using some CAD models which are still virtual, and then we are able to get some product in the physical space, right? So To understand how it works, one of the simple example is if you see the background, how this 3D printing was actually started. So what I can say from the MIT side, they started with a very simple and innovative or a novel process of using a simple powder as a constructing material and a one binder through some nozzle. So what they actually did is on a simple inkjet printer that we are having on our desktop, a simple inkjet printer, from one nozzle, some powder was being, sprinkled. Then from the another nozzle, some binder was being sprinkled. So layer of powder, layer of binder, layer of powder, layer of binder. I am able to get a third dimension, that is the thickness. So this is how, in a simple way, we can think about a 3D printing part. To understand in another simple way, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, rapid prototyping, it creates a physical object from a digital design. Like for example, I am interested in this type of the product. So layer by layer, I am adding and finally I am getting a product. So each successive layer is bound to the preceding layer, which may be melted, partially melted on a build platform until we get a 3D printed part. So I think this is nowadays quite common, and we are quite comfortable how the parts can be printed, right? I have just given one example. I can sprinkle some powder on a bed, right? Then I can sprinkle some binder, then another layer of powder, another layer of binder, another layer of powder, another layer of binder. So multiple layer of powder, multiple layer of binders, I am getting a some defined thickness, right? So I am getting a 3D printed part. Now suppose I am interested in some polymer based part, so I can have some thermoplastic feedstock filament, which is just basically a wire. So that feedstock filament I am just moving through some heating chamber, and I am converting some larger dia into the smaller dia into the fine strands, and then I am depositing that fine semi molten polymer layer by layer on some surface. I am getting a 3D printed part, right? So this is the overview of 3D. Now, what is the 4D? 4D is basically the extension of 3D. In other words, I can say that the printing of the smart material is categorized as a 4D printing. Basically, the another dimension that I am getting, that is as a function of time, I am getting some useful property. To understand in a simple way, let us take the example of a piezoelectric crystal. So we have a piezoelectric crystal like quartz. If I apply a load on a piezo crystal, there will be a change in dimension. So length may increase, right? So if I release the load, it will come back to the original dimension. Now you do this exercise number of times, you apply a load, the dimension will change, you release a load, it will come back to the original dimension, right? So what does this mean? If I use a piezo crystal, apply a load, the length dimension is changed, release a load, its dimension is coming to the original dimension. There is some relation with respect to the load applied and as respect to the dimension of the part, right? And this has a lot of repeatability. Repeatability is there. So similarly, I am interested in some printing of the smart material, which is one given some stimulus, it behave in a controlled manner, right? The stimulus may be in the form of load, the stimulus may be in the form of electric field, the stimulus may be in the form of magnetic field, the stimulus may be in the form of some voltage, it may be in the form of some chemical energy, it may be in the form of some current, or it can be some combination of things like current and voltage or moisture. So there can be some thermomechanical effects. So different type of stimulus can be there. Is it loud and clear to everyone? Is it clear? Is it audible, please?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in continuation to our discussion, let us take one simple example of a sunflower. If you just see the sunflower, it always faces towards the sun. So once there is a movement of the earth around the sun, right? So sunflower always faces towards the sun. Or in the morning, you can see before the sunrise, right? The face of the flower is down, right? So with the sunrise, the flower is facing up. Now after sunset, again it faces down. So there is some stimulus which is in the form of light, which is which is helping to give me some controlled movement, right? So I can control some angular movement, right? I can control some dimensional variation, right? So basically in 4D printing, I am interested in a printing of a material which is under the effect of some stimulus, and that stimulus is giving me a controlled behavior. So the material which can change its physical state maybe after solidification when triggered by external stimulus is recognized as a smart material. Basically here we define two types of systems. One is called autonomic and another is called non-autonomic system. In basically autonomic system, this behavior is more or less automatic, and in non-autonomic systems some human intervention is required, like we are interested in changing some state. So I am changing, let us say, some value of the current, so the material is behaving in a different manner, right? So 4D printing is basically an extension of the 3D printing. So 3D printing becomes 4D with a fourth dimension as a function of time, right? Like all of you must have gone to some of the malls and you must have seen the 6D experience, 7D experience, 9D experience. Similarly, with some different stimulus, I am trying to behave to control some of the property, so accordingly I can change some of the dimension. Like for example, if I go to some cinema hall and with some special specs, I can see the 3D effect, right? Then I can feel the sound effect with some instrument. Then I can feel some rain effect. I can feel some effect of touch, right? In understanding the 9D effect, something like that. Similarly, if my material is behaving in a really controlled manner, right, under some stimulus, so it is adding another dimension into that material. So what can be the reasons for this smartness? The reason can be the intrinsic property or it may be the extrinsic property. Intrinsic means the property is well within that material, and it is the internal property like self-expansion, self-contraction. I have given one example of self-contraction and self-expansion, like that of the quartz crystal. Now, like as a mechanical engineer, you all understand. Once we are doing some machining, I am interested in measurement of the forces, right? So for the measurement of the forces on a some machine tool, I am interested in taking the measurement using a dynamometer. So dynamometer basically giving me, let us say, the forces in the x, y, and z direction, right? And for optimizing the tool life, I'm really interested in controlling those forces, as the resultant is really important for the shear velocity, then velocity of the along the shear zone, something like that, right? So that those dynamometers are like using these type of the piezoelectric crystals. Now just imagine, in place of a piezoelectric crystal, I am putting some smart material which may be much less, having much less cost as compared to the piezo part, and that can be easily 3D printed and installed on a system. Right? So inherent property like that of a quartz crystal of self-expansion and self-contraction will lead to some smart behavior in 3D printed part, right? Then there can be another way of adding these properties, like one of the ways using some reinforcement. Like for example, most of the thermoplastics, these are known having known electrical conductivity, and it is not having a uh, uh, thermal conductivity. So we are interested in basically better electrical and thermal conductivity. So we used to add some, let us say, uh, metallic powder like aluminium powder, or I am interested in adding graphene powder to it. So I add some sort of a reinforcement to give some value to that material, to enhance some property. So that is basically a extrinsic way. Then there is another very common way of increasing the property, that is through the concept of the metamaterial. This metamaterial concept is little new for mechanical engineers, but this is very commonly used in civil structures. The concept of a metamaterial. So what actually is a metamaterial? The metamaterial is something related to the final property of the material, not because of the inherent property, but the link and the angle of the link, how these different layers are joined. That is actually responsible for giving me some desired strength. To put my point, I give you one example. All of you must have seen a railway bridge. So in those railway bridge, in place of a solid section, we are using some different trusses. So those trusses which are used on a railway bridge, they have a definite length of the link, and then the angle at which those links are joined, that angle is really important, right? And I'm using those standard process dimension for reducing the weight of the section, and finally with much lighter weight of the section, and the bridge can withstand the load of a of a train and something like that, right? So similarly, in case of the metamaterial, we are really interested in a material, how the different links are joined, what is the length of the link, what is the angle, how the material is being joined, and this helps me in getting some of the smart properties in a material. To put the point, just take the example of a simple plier. In a simple plier, the outer link, I am that is the extension part. Just take it like a lever. I am putting some load. Then there is a some section in the center where some sort of a hinge type operation is there. Then on the other end, it has to take some load. Right now, if I make all these three sections of a same way of construction, right, that the strength may be similar, but the portion where I am interested in picking the part, there the requirement of the strength is more towards the compressive nature, whereas on the other hand, I am interested in having a strength of the more tensile nature, right? Then at the middle part, there may be some shear properties are required. So I can print the material with a particular printing fashion where these specific properties are required. I will show you with a example, and this helps me in getting a better strength of the material in respect of the, even if the inherent mechanical properties, right? So that is the idea of using a metamaterial type 3D printing, right? Now, to understand what sort of a programming we can do in this 4D part, let us say my material is in the state A, I give some stimulus and it is going to the state B, right? Then again you give another stimulus, it is coming to the state A. This is a one way of programming, right? Then there is another way of programming, like material in the state A, you can put the stimulus on, you can switch off the stimulus, and the state of the material is convertible. Like for example, you are having some stimulus, let us say the voltage or the current. So you switch on the current, it is in a different state. You switch off the current, it is in a different state. I will give you one example. We have a thermoplastic material called PVDF. This is a polyvinyl difluorine. This is a very commonly used material for these type of the 4D properties, right? So, and if you give a high voltage to the tune of 5 to 11 kVA, right? So what will happen? It changes its phase from alpha to beta, right? So once I change the state of the material from alpha to beta, basically what happens? There is a compaction, like that case of a piezoelectric crystal. Now you again come back to the original voltage level, right? Then you can again convert from beta to alpha, right? So basically, if you see the chemistry part, what is going on? The material is having a carbon-carbon chain, and then it is on each carbon it has a hydrogen and fluorine. So once you give a high voltage, all hydrogen comes on the one side of the chain, and all fluorine goes to the other side of the chain. So this leads to some wonderful forces of attraction. So there is a compression, or the force of attraction is there because of that type of the force. Now you again switch off the voltage, right? Again come back to the low voltage case. Then again alternatively hydrogen and fluorine will be there. So this helps me in controlling the particular property of the material with respect to a stimulus that is the voltage in that case. Then there can be a multi-stage programming, like you can have some stimulus which is converting A to A1, then another stimulus A1 to A2, then another stimulus A2 to A. So this basically leads to the 4D printing of the material. So there can be more than one stimulus. There can be the combination of stimulus. Some process may be under the effect of temperature they are behaving. For some material under the effect of voltage they are behaving. Sometimes the combination may be two combination, maybe three stimulus combination. It is basically controlling the behavior of the material. Right. So this is about the basic of the 4D printing. Now let us take some of the examples to put our point, and we will see how actually we are controlling this process. So we start with one of the low cost manufacturing process, that is called fuse deposition modeling. Is it clearly audible, please? Loud and clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So as you can see in this picture, this is one of the most widely low cost 3D printing process. Actually, what we are doing in this process is, I have a feedstock filament. This is a feedstock filament. This blue color, dark blue color wire you are seeing over here. This wire is being fed into some of the chamber over here. I am calling this chamber as a liquefier, right? So if you see the exploded view, some wire is being forced into some liquefier. Here I am having a heating arrangement over here, and the dia of the wire is reducing from larger section to this smaller one. Here some sort of a nozzle section is there, and I am getting a reduced dia. For the commercial this FDM based printer, one of the most commonly used dia is 1.75 mm. But otherwise, the commercial printer we are getting in the range of 0.4 to 4.0 mm. But most commonly used size is 1.75 mm. If you just do Google and try to see what are the sizes available commercially, so you will get a maximum size of 1.75 mm. Right? So once this wire is fed into this liquefier chamber, which is being mechanically forced through some pulleys, right, and it is being forced into this chamber. Here we are having some heating arrangement, right? So this thermoplastic wire, which is normally having a melting temperature from 150 to 300 degrees Celsius, right? So it is being forced to come through some reducing section like a nozzle, and the dia is the output wire varies from 0.25 to 0.8 mm, right? So initial dia was 1.75. Then depending upon the nozzle size, you can have something dia of the thin wire in the range of 0.2 to 0.8 mm, right? So that thin wire is being deposited layer by layer on this surface. I am getting a 3D printed part, right? As the part is being built, this platform comes down, so you can get a thickness of the part. Now there can be some of the question why there are two different color of wire. So one wire we are calling as a build material, the another wire I am calling as a sport material. Like for example, I am interested in some cantilever type part construction, right? So you can see, like in this case, this dark blue part is the final part. So this light blue or the sky blue part is basically a sport material. So once I want to provide some sport to this section, so I am putting some sport material over here, right? So normally this sport material is water soluble in nature, and this build material spool is the oil soluble in nature. So what actually we do, so if I am interested in some complex contour in which I have to give some sport, right? So some sport material we provide over here. So once the part is ready, then actually what we do to put this part in a cleaning chamber where we have a ultrasonification, right? Normally 30 kilohertz ultrasonic transducer we are using, and the temperature of 65 to 75 degrees Celsius, right? So then processing this material at this ultrasonic vibration, and some water content is there, so as it is a water soluble, and then there is the ultrasonic cleaning. So we are able to dissolve the whole sport material into this section, right? So finally you will get a only the required build material part. So that is the reason we are having a two different color spools over here, right? So there are many commercial manufacturers, and the cost of this type of printer may vary from 30,000 to maybe 20 lakhs, depending upon the accuracy, depending upon the type of the process control you want. And nowadays, I suppose in all of the basic engineering colleges, polytechnic colleges, this technology is quite common, right? Now, the point is, we have this technology, how to make this technology from 3D to 4D. So what we can do over here is, in this particular feedstock filament or a wire, I am interested in inculcating some of the properties, like if I am interested in adding, let us say, some extrinsic property, right? So I can do some sort of a reinforcement. Like I am interested in making some, let us say, functional prototype which is having a better abrasive particles or abrasive properties. I am interested in making some tooling for, let us say, grinding application. So what I can do, I can make some of the reinforcement of alumina like Al2O3, and that reinforcement will basically help me to build a foam tool of a particular shape that is required for a particular application, right? And then if I am interested in, increasing the capability of the tool with some stimulus, that actually I can do. We will show you how we can use that stimulus. Now, this is the first case study that I am going to discuss with you. This is on the sustainability of ABS and PA6 using a banana fiber reinforcement, and we are interested in thermal, mechanical, and morphological properties. Now, what is sustainability and why we are interested? Specifically, in a typical polymer business, one of the major problem with the polymer, which we categorize as a thermoplastic or thermosetting, is their recyclability. So, from the recyclability point of view, we categorize this into the four categories, like primary recycling, secondary recycling, tertiary recycling, and quaternary recycling, right? So I am interested in recycling of the polymer, which is of course one of the thrust area for research at the international level under the category of the waste management. So in the typically in the line of thermoplastic, we call it as a primary recycled, secondary recycled, tertiary recycled, or the quaternary recycled material. So what is the primary recycling? Like I have shown you one example of preparing a feedstock filament. What we do is we use some filament granules of polymer granules of some common material. Like one of the most commonly used material is the ABS. I make a functional part. Let us say the life of the part is over. Now I am interested in in increasing the or the recyclability of this material. I do some crushing, and then I try to make the granules again, and then try to make some other part. So this is a primary way of recycling, in which I am using a mechanical way of recycling without any reinforcement, right? So this helps me in getting the sustainable product. Then if I am interested in secondary way of recycling, then this is of course this is a mechanical way of recycling, but sometimes with the use of the material, some of the mechanical, thermal, biological, morphological properties are lost. Then we go on adding some sort of a reinforcement. So secondary recycling is basically adding some reinforcement into it, so that the properties of the primary recycled product is improved, right? So again, the difference between primary and secondary is, in secondary I do again the primary way of recycling, that is the mechanical way of recycling, but with the addition of reinforcement, right? So sometimes there may be a case when even with the reinforcement, the properties are not improved, right? Because of the problem with the uniform dispersion of the material, right? So then what we do is we go for the chemical way of recycling. We call it as a chemical assisted blending, right? Like for example, this ABS, which is a ferronitride butadiene and styrene, this material is getting dissolved into the acetone, right? So if I am interested in, let us say, putting some of the reinforcement into it, and I am interested in nano level dispersion, what I can do is I can first have a chemical solvent like acetone in this case, and then I put the reinforcement, then I do the mechanical blending and do the extrusion process. So this is a way of chemical assisted mechanical blending. So we call it as a tertiary way of recycling, right? Then there is a quaternary way, basically that is not very common. This is basically a energy recovery process. This is like one of the typical example is the use of the investment casting process, where we are basically investing these type of the patterns, and finally we are interested in the final product of, as a metal part. So primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. These are the four established standard ways of recycling the polymer material, and all these four ways we can do through the 3D printing. So this particular case study that I am trying to explain over here is the secondary way of recycling. Why secondary? Because I am reinforcing now banana fiber, which is a reinforcement. So once it is a reinforcement, I am putting it mechanically in ABS, which is basically a very commonly used polymer, and PA6 polyamide 6. This is basically a nylon, and we are interested in finding their thermal properties, their mechanical properties, their morphological properties for the 3D printing application. Right. So what actually we did and why and how we started. Like once we were working on this FDM filament based 3D printing. One of the supplier was from Jalgaon in Maharashtra. So what he explained to us that at his place there was a lot of banana fiber available, and there is a problem with the disposal of those type of the banana fibers. So what we did is we procured the banana fiber at something rupees 100 per kg. This is having a huge volume, and that banana fibers we reinforced into the polymers, and we try to prepare the feedstock filament, and we try to print those parts. Okay. I don't know why this happened. So the screen is visible, please. Is the screen
Yes, sir.
visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay, okay. So what actually we did in this study, there is a very good paper by Behreen et al. So in that particular study, it was reported that for the better dispersion of the banana fiber, the length may be kept around 1000 micron with a dia of 100 micron. So similarly, we prepared the at lab scale those banana fiber, and we try to reinforce those banana fibers into the polymer matrix as a secondary way of recycling. So you can see just for the experimentation purpose, we tried 5% by weight, and as 5% by weight has a lot of volume actually, right? So with this we try to have a mechanical extrusion. So this is the setup for the extrusion. This is basically called a twin screw extrusion. We are having this setup in our lab. This is a German-based Thermo Fisher setup. It is having two screws over here. Normally, if you go for this extrusion, the people are using a single screw extruder. So in single screw extruder, basically, what the idea is, I have a some hooper from where I am putting some material. Then the screw is forcing that material into the die at a particular temperature, and I am getting a wire form out of it, right? But in this twin screw extruder, we are having the two screws, and these two screws are having a very innovative profile on the outer surface of these screws, and these are the intermeshing screws. Because of the profile on these screws, which is a patent, the cost of this setup is really high. So what we actually do is we put some material over here. Intermeshing screw forces this material within this chamber. On this side we have a die, and some wire bits of filament is being prepared. So some of the settings that have been kept were like temperature to 30 degree. For this nozzle dia has been kept fixed, and then there is some torque or RPM, and that I can control. So once I am having a feedstock filament that was put into the 3D printer. So this is the open source 3D printer over which we printed some of the tensile coupons, flexible coupons, then compressive coupons as per various ASTM standards. Like in this particular picture, you can see for the tensile specimen, ASTM D638 Type 4 standard has been used, right? So based on the CAD file, right? We printed the standard tensile specimen in which the reinforcement of banana fiber has been made 5% by weight in the ABS and similarly 5% by weight in the polyamide 6, which is basically a nylon. These are one of the most commonly used thermoplastic for the 3D printing application. Now this is really important. Some of you may not have worked on this. This is basically a DSC analysis. Basically, DSC is a differential scanning colorimetry. I am interested in understanding whether my material that I have prepared for 3D printing is thermally stable or not. Now to understand this, let us have a very simple example. Suppose I go to market and purchase 2 buckets of thermoplastic material, same company, same dimension, same color, same material, right? And one bucket I have put in my bathroom, and second bucket I have put on the rooftop, right? Now you can well appreciate that the bucket that I have put in the bathroom, it may work quite good for a long period of time, maybe 2 years, maybe more than that. But the bucket that has been put on the rooftop, it may have the development of cracks maybe in few days. The basic reason is the aggressive environment, like in the hot summer, the temperature outside may go up to 50, and then in the night time it may go quite low. So with heating and cooling cycle, the energy absorbing capacity of the material may not match with the energy releasing capacity. If this is the case, then the material is not considered suitable for some functional part, and similarly that functional uh, capability, if it is not there, then of course the 3D printed part will fail under the effect of those thermal stimulus, right? To understand the thermal stability of the material, we try to understand the thermal behavior in a repetitive heating cooling cycle. Now, if you clearly see in this diagram, along the x-axis, we have two scales. One is of the temperature, like from room temperature, I am raising to 50, 100, 150, 200, 250 maximum. And then from 250, it is going to the room temperature, like 250, 200, 150, 150, and then let us say the room temperature. Then again rise up to 250, then again it is coming to the room temperature. So this is basically first heating, then cooling, then another heating, then cooling. Then there will be another heating, then there will be another cooling, right? Similarly, along the x-axis, we are having a time scale. So for this, how much time you are performing this test? Basically, I am interested in increasing the temperature of the material at a particular rate. Means at what rate the heat should be given. This depends on my functional part, where actually my part is going to be there, and then at what rate the heat to be expected. To understand in a better way, I give you one example. There is a one very common vehicle, commercially used vehicle, that was a Tata Sumo. So once it was launched, in its dashboard there was a problem that some sort of a depression or bulging in, bulging out type situation was observed in case of the dashboard of some of the vehicles. Just imagine your vehicle is in some area in Rajasthan, and there is no one in the cabin, and it is in the peak summer. The time may be around 1 p.m. 2 p.m. and the temperature and the whole the all the glosses are up, and the temperature inside the cabin may be around 70 degrees, right, or more. So at that temperature, right, so the material is absorbing some heat, continuously it is absorbing. Now once you are in the chamber, you start AC in the cabin, right, so the temperature is getting down. Now the rate at which the heat input was given and rate at which the heat is being extracted, if it is not matching with the thermal stability capability of that material, then definitely there will be buzzing in and buzzing out some situation, and there may be some surface cracks over the whole dashboard. Similar type of things are being observed once you are in a very cold environment, let us say in some region in Leh Ladakh, where the outside temperature may go up to -20, -30. So once I am developing some functional material through 3D printing, I have to be very careful at what rate my material should be heated and at what rate the heat expected should be there. right? And along the y-axis, I am understanding the energy absorbed in joule per gram. So how much energy it is absorbing in joule per gram of that material. Now, if you see in these two graphs, for the ABS material, I am getting a peak melting at around 190, and once 5% banana fiber was added, the peak melting was increased. And in the repetitive cycle, I am also getting a similar type of result. So this basically shows the material is thermally stable, and in the repetitive cycle, I am getting a stable behavior of that material. Now the similar thing was observed for the polyamide, and if you see without the reinforcement of banana fiber, the maximum melting that we were observing was around at 217, and with the reinforcement of the banana fiber, it was increased to 225. So that means the reinforcement resulted into better better thermal properties. So this can be considered as a better situation uh, for making some of the functional prototypes. So similarly, we try to observe some of the mechanical properties like in terms of peak load and brake load. You can well appreciate from this diagram that with the reinforcement in ABS as 5% banana fiber, the mechanical properties were improved. Similarly, in polyamide, again the mechanical properties were improved. In the terms of peak load, then similar observations were for the peak strength and brake strength. And similarly, the elongation behavior was significantly improved. We try to find out the reason for this, and what we observed that the porosity percentage was significantly reduced once we were adding this banana fiber into this material. That was probably one of the reasons that why this mechanical property were improved. Now we are just trying to ascertain what can be the application for this type of the feedstock phenomenon. Like one of the simple application can be like in the construction business. Once I am interested in construction, I have to put some iron bars on the rooftop, right? So those iron bars are being tied with a uh, MS wire, which is of course highly prone to the oxidation. Now, if you see, if I use this thermoplastic reinforced banana fiber wire, it is giving me the better percentage elongation as compared to the MS. So that means if because of the movement of the earth, there will be some displacement, and the wall is or the roof is going to collapse. Basically, it will have a more elongation, and it is not going to collapse immediately. So there will be a better elongation. So there can be the better situation for the as regard to the safety is concerned. And then if we are making the functional prototype out of it, and if I go for the dynamic mechanical analysis of that material, definitely the storage modulus and loss modulus condition will be better in this type of material, right? So this is the one of the advantage of developing this particular combination uh, for the 3D print, right? So another observation was with respect to the porosity and some optimization studies for peak load, brake load, elongation, young modulus. This has been made. So this is the first case study that I want to share with all of you, that with the reinforcement of some agri-waste banana fiber, again I am doing the sustainability, because the agri-waste disposal is another problem. Increasing the some mechanical property, thermal property of material is another advantage. So I am getting with this the best of both worlds, right? So this was the example of a secondary recycling. Now I am going to give you one example of a tertiary recycling. In this tertiary recycling, I am basically interested in developing a energy storage device, uh, uh, basically a cell or a battery for our daily use, right? So how it works? Basically, if you see the our daily use cell or a battery, which we call as a pencil cell or A3 battery, it consists of 4 zones, which involves MnO2, zinc chloride, ammonium chloride, and graphite. And if you see the consumed part in that cell is mainly the ammonium chloride part, right? So whereas the rest of the things are still intact, and because of the consumption of one particular material, the chemical reaction is stopped, and we have to replace the whole battery. The idea here is like if a particular material is being consumed, let us print this in some separate disk form, right? And only the component that is being consumed, let us refill it, right? So it may help me in recycling and reducing the cost of this particular energy storage device, right? So for this particular application, we are secondly interested in using a thermoplastic polymer material again to improve the recyclability. So what actually we did is first we performed the rheological analysis. Are you able to see the picture on the screen? Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
your voice words
sir.
are not clear.
Pardon?
Voice is loud, but not words are not much clear, sir.
Voice is not clear.
सर वर्ड्स क्लियर नहीं है सर, लाउड है वैसे, वर्ड्स थोड़े से क्लियर नहीं आ रहे.
Is it better now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyway, so this is the first test we want to perform before I go for the development of this type of the product. You can see in this particular picture, I am having a setup which I am calling it as a melt flow indexer. This is basically as per ASTM D1238 standard. ASTM D1238, right? But actually this standard says, I have a barrel over here, right? In this barrel, I apply some load, right? I can control some temperature, right? And then in this barrel, I fill my feedstock, my polymer material, apply some load, have some temperature. Then on this side of the barrel, I have a die, and with the application of the load and temperature, I am able to get some feedstock filament wire, right? Now, how much gram in 10 minutes I am getting, that is called the MFI of that material. If the MFI is more, basically I am able to make the thin section. If MFI is less, I will be getting the thick section. So that is the basic idea of doing this test, right? Like for example, I am interested in getting a special contour of the part through 3D printing or through injection molding. So I have to be very clear what will be the flowability of material. Like in case of the typical metals, we are interested in understanding how much distance the metal will flow before the solidification, right? So that will be depending on some viscosity part. So similarly, in case of the polymer, for the specially ensuring the printability, I am interested in understanding its rheological property, and that rheological property is basically the melt flow index of that material, right? So this is the one of the basic tests. Now, what we actually did in this is initially we take the 100% by weight of the ABS, right? And we try to see what is the MFI of this material. This comes out to be 9 gram per 10 minutes. Now you may have a question, why I am getting the investigations for the MFI of the material once it is a virgin material. Now the answer is, this ABS, I can get it of different grades, right? So each grade of ABS will be having a different rheological properties. It depends on how polymerization was done, right? So the flow property may vary. So we get this ABS in a wide range. So in commercial practice, we call it as a different grades of ABS are available, right? So whatever material I am getting at a particular time, whether it is a primary recycled, right, or how many times it has recycled, the MFI may vary. So before I start working on development of the product, I must know what is the flow property of that material. So for 100% virgin material, right, that means without reinforcement, I have to ensure what is the flowability of that material. So it is measured in terms of gram per 10 minutes. So I have a barrel, in which some material, some granules, defined quantity of the granules is being put into the barrel. I applied some load. So as per ASTM 1238D standard, I have a defined quantity of load. I have a fixed temperature application. Then with a load and temperature, we measure how much gram per 10 minutes this type of feedstock is coming, right? Then what we did is we go on adding different type of reinforcement. Like in this case, the graphite by 10% was put into it. Now you see 90% ABS and 10% graphite, the MFI was reduced drastically from 9 to 2.51. Similarly, with the more addition of reinforcement, there was a different result of the MFI. Initially, it reduced, then it started increasing, then after some time, it has another behavior. So similarly, we try to ascertain the behavior with the zinc chloride and ammonium chloride powder. Similarly, with the MnO2 powder, and we got a different trend, not a similar trend for the flow property of this type of the material. Right now, there is a separate study why this behavior is like this, why it is increasing then decreasing, sometimes increasing then suddenly decreasing. Right, so this is a separate study in the material science why we are getting this behavior. But from the material processing engineer point of view, I am interested in getting a ratio of the reinforcement and the base material, where I am getting a range of a MFI which is almost near to it, so that I should not alter the hardware and the software setting on my machine. Otherwise, it will involve a lot of functional variation, and finally product quality will be deteriorated. Like in this case, you see, if I take a 60% ABS and 40% reinforcement, the MFI was coming around 2.46. Similarly, for this combination with zinc chloride and ammonium chloride, it was coming around 2.5. But for MnO2, the results were different, right? So I have to be, really careful while selecting the material in such a way that I can change the proportion, but the range should be similar, so that the final thickness of the disc that I am going to print should not alter. Right now, in this case, we selected, let us say, 60-40 for graphite, 60-40 for ammonium chloride and zinc chloride, and let us say the 65-35 for this particular combination. Right. So you can see in this picture, some discs are being printed, and then finally some assembly is being done for getting the final output in the form of the desired voltage. So what actually we observe, once we assembled it, we are not able to get the voltage. So we are really disheartened that after so much effort, why some output is not there. So one of the probable reason may be that there may not be the proper flow of the charge. So suddenly we got an idea, let us put some drops of acetone at the interface, so that the ABS may dissolve and there should be a flow of the charge. And once we did that, we suddenly get a very good voltage as the output in the form of 1.5. And we try to see some of the mechanical properties by making the tensile coupon, and we try to see their thermal behavior also. So what we observed in their thermal behavior, the material that we have developed with the reinforcement of these type of the salts in a polymer, it is giving very good result in terms of output voltage at high temperature up to 95 to 97 degrees Celsius, and similarly even at minus 20 degrees Celsius. So this is really a advantage of doing this type of the reinforcement, that I am getting a very high voltage, or not very high, I am getting a controlled voltage at very high temperature as well as low temperature, right? So this is the advantage. Secondly, we are able to minimum consume the 40% of the waste polymer. So that is the another advantage of the recycling. Then the third advantage is the particular disk part that is being consumed, you can again disassemble and then assemble. We need not to throw the whole cell. Like for example, if you go to some of the shops for purchasing some, let us say, grocery item, and you don't have a loose change, sometimes the shopkeeper gives you some candies or something like that. So we think maybe in coming 1 or 2 years, you may get the some cell, okay, part A, B, C, D. Okay, you can take part C at, let us say, 150, right? So that can be one of the advantage. Then the another technical advantage that we got out of this is we got a lot of design flexibility. As this is a 3D printed part, right? So why to have a cell always of a cylindrical shape? We can think of the cell like a sticker, right? And each sticker I can put one over the another, and then once the complete chemical reaction is there with a sticker type cell, I can get a desired voltage as per my requirement. So basically, recycling, 3D printing, and then the combination of different type of layer by layer manufacturing for giving me some desired output. So this is the one of the advantage that we can make our own energy storage device and can really contribute for the waste management. Okay, now some of the important part that I want to share with you as regard to the 4D printing, some of the innovative things that we are doing at our lab. This is basically a motivated idea from the basic law of physics. We are interested in making some smart 4D parts which can be 3D printed, and we are interested in some stimulus which can be in the form of electric current or some voltage. So how actually it works? Normally in our physics lab we used to have experiment maybe in the first year, like there are two parallel current carrying wires carrying current in the same direction. So they are having north south, they are getting attraction, right? And then if the direction of the current is varied, so we are seeing the repulsion. So the same principle has been used on the 3D printed part, and we are interested in making some sort of a transducer type application. How actually you can see in this blue color is a plastic wire, and I have put a layer of a basically non-conducting thermoplastic material. Then the green color is another thermoplastic wire in which some reinforcement of aluminum or copper powder or graphene powder can be made. So one non-conducting, then conducting, then non-conducting, then conducting, then non-conducting. So these type of layer deposition we can make for some functional parts. Now what we are doing is we are giving some direction of the current like this. So if it is the case, then there will be formation of north and south over here. Again the north and south over here. So this north and south there will be a attraction. So we will be having a attraction over here. But if there is another case, the direction of the with some microcontroller I can change the direction of the current between the layers. So there will be south and south. So there will be a repulsion. So basically using this simple principle, and by printing the alternative material with the conducting and non-conducting type case, we can actually make a transducer. Now in a typical mechanical engineering application, let us see this application in non-traditional machining. This is the setup. I think most of you are quite aware. This is for ultrasonic machining. For some of the users, let me just explain in a minute how this works. I have a transducer over here. This transducer converts electrical input into the mechanical vibration. And if you see the commercial transducer, these are piezo based, right? I am interested in a transducer which is having a piezoelectric properties. And if you see some of the commercial manufacturers like Sonic Mill, the yeah, the transducer something cost me something around $10. But if you make it through 3D printing, this will not cost you more than 70 to 80 rupees. We have tried to develop this transducer, right? So with this transducer, some electrical energy is converted into the mechanical vibration, and then I have a proper mechanical amplifier, and then I have a tool. This tool is attached with this solar node, and then there is a workpiece. So in between the tool and workpiece, there is a flow of the slurry, right? So once the slurry movement is there, the tool is not actually in contact with the job. So this slurry particles, when they come in contact with the tool, their momentum is increased. Normally, as per the reported literature, the increase in momentum is around 1.5 lakh times. With that high momentum, the abrasive particles strike with the workpiece, and there is a erosion. Right now, there are two problems in this setup. One is I have to have a transducer for converting some electrical input into the mechanical vibration. Second problem is with the life of the tool. In typical USM process, this life of the tool is really compromised. Like with this tool, if you just see the manual of the commercial manufacturers like Sonic Mill, I have already taken the name. This basically tool, and weight is really important, right? So to control the weight of the tool, they are basically controlling it to the length of the tool. Like for example, there is a this is, let us say this is the tool and here is the workpiece, and in between some slurry is flowing. Now the slurry particles are striking with the tool. Then with the because of the ultrasonic vibration, those slurry are again coming back to the job with very high momentum, normally 1.5 lakh times, and some sort of a cavitation type situation is there, right? So with the removal of the some material from the workpiece, there is also a tool here involved in this, right? So if I keep the tool long, I can have a better tool life, right? But the problem is with the larger length of the tool, right? I cannot control the weight, right? So the machine basically shows me auto cut. So we are interested in basically a material, a smart material, which will be of less weight, but the length can be appreciably long. So that can help me in getting the better properties as regard to the USM is concerned. The third thing that we are interested is, can we have a combination of more than one processes? Means, can I go for a post finishing along with the machining going on? So these problems are actually being solved with this 3D printing. How actually we did? This is a the tool holder. In this case, in place of the metal tool, we use the thermoplastic reinforced tool, which was 3D printed. And what we did is we divided this into the three zones. This is basically a combination of machining, ultrasonic drilling, and broaching. As you know, as a typical mechanical engineering, in broaching, I am interested in performing roughing, semi-finishing, and finishing operation together. So initially, once the tool tip is in contact with the abrasive particles, right? Because of the presence of the alumina particles that have been reinforced into this, so it is giving me better bounce back, right? And the first zone that I am calling as a rough zone, here we are using a coarse grain of alumina, right? So once the tool is entering into this, so because of the side walls of the hole, those are being getting into better finishing stage because of the presence of the coarse grain of the Al2O3. Then we have a semi-finishing zone where we are having a fine grains of alumina, and then those will be coming in contact with the walls of the hole. Then we are having a super finishing zone where we will be having super fine Al2O3 particles. So what will happen once the drilling is going on? First, the part of the tool which is in three zones: the lower zone, the middle zone, and the top zone. Lower zone with a coarse grain of alumina, the middle zone with a relatively fine grain of alumina, and the top zone with the super fine grain of alumina. So they will help in getting the broaching as well as machining together. So this is the advantage that we got with 3D printing only, as we have a better design flexibility. And in a single tool, I can do this. So combination of the hybridization of the processes possible. Similarly, this hybridization can be further extended with EDM. It can be further extended with ECM and magnetic abrasive machining. So that is possible only because of the we have a flexibility of printing with 3D. So that is the advantage that we are getting. right? So before I conclude, just another innovative part that I want to explain to all of you with the 3D printing is using some, innovative nozzle profile for making some part with a better surface finish. Most of the time, the nozzle that I have shown you, this type of FDM material, this is circular in nature. So once the material comes out of this, it becomes elliptical. This is basically a standard effect that we call as the Baru effect, Baru, BARU, right? So what will happen with this? If you just deposit the material layer by layer, you will have a staircase effect in between, right? So if you just see the 2D, so you will see there is a air gap, right? So what actually we did is we developed a innovative profile with the EDM wire cut, right? And we try to have a nozzle of a shape like this, and then with this shape of nozzle, we got the output in the form of a triangle, right? Actually, we got this idea from the color television. So once there was a in mid 80s, once this color television was launched commercially in our country, we used to get a pixel developed on a silver screen in the form of circle. Then at that time, maybe in something from 83 to 85, this Sony people, they came up with a technology called the trim-up-down technology, in which they basically optimize the distance of the gun with respect to the silver screen, angle of bombardment, and the velocity. The resultant was that the pixel was not like a circle, it was like a triangle. So once the first layer we developed, it was just like a triangle. Then the second layer was just inverted, right? So we changed the direction of the nozzle, and the second layer was put like an inverted triangle. So if you see like this, now the air gap is less, so you will get a better surface finish. Then there can be some other different innovative profiles, like we can use the combination of circle and this type of some complex profile. So the combination may look like something like this. So these type of the innovations may help me in improving some finish, which we call as a staircase effect in case of my polymer printed part. And of course, if you are interested in improving the properties of this type of the material, then definitely we can add some stimulus, which can help me in controlling the pore size, in controlling the porosity, in controlling the grain structure. We would like to show you some of the live case studies how we have given some stimulus to control these type of the pores. That is all about this session for the introduction. Now I am open for any question I would like to answer. Any question from the audience I would like to answer. Anybody wants to ask any question? Yes, anyone please? Any query? Any query I would like to answer.
No, sir.
Okay, there is one query. Can we use pineapple leaf fiber as powder-based fusion method as material? See, if you are interested in using this as a reinforcement, definitely we can. We tried it with different type of the agriculture waste, through which we can actually, do some sort of a reinforcement and can add into the thermoplastic material. This is very much possible. Okay, some persons are interested in this slides. Let me tell you, all the presentations will be available after some minor editing on the YouTube channel. You can see through the institute link, and even all the courses for that is available on the YouTube channel, that is through the institute only. So you can just scroll down the later site and can see a particular session or a particular lecture. You will get a link on the YouTube. Okay, there is another question how we can program the mechanism for simulating the smart material. So probably the programming is categorized into three types. So primary means one-way programming, two-way programming, and multi-stage programming. So we must understand what sort of uh, you are interested in, what sort of a stimulus, right? So this is a one way, means like you are converting, let us say you are taking heat as a stimulus, yes. Then you are taking, let us say, moisture as another stimulus, right? Then you are taking the load as another stimulus. So there can be a different stimulus. So depending on the application and the material, whether this responds to this particular type of stimulus, we can think of having this type of output. The mechanism, if I simply say, is dependent upon the material, how it behaves. Like we tried with some of the chemicals for some building materials, and we try to work on one chemical that is called DMF. It helps me to increase the surface finish in a big way by controlling the porosity. And then we want to, again increase the porosity, so we use the carbonic acid. So for a particular material, I will share you in the coming session that how actually we can control with the level of exposure and the time of exposure with some of the chemicals as a as a stimulus for this type of material. So there is another query: rapid prototyping and rapid manufacturing are both different. So rapid manufacturing, we are interested in manufacturing the component at very fast. So what I can say, RP is a subset of rapid manufacturing. Then there is a query: is it possible to produce a part without support? Of course, you can have the support structure requirement in some of the very intricate shapes, but in some of the case you can play with some orientation angle with respect to x, y, and z plane, and can control the minimum scope. We are actually playing with this specifically once I am interested in a metal printing, because in polymer printing actually we don't mind this scope. The reason is you can easily remove it by dissolving. But in case of metal printing, we are having a problem because the model material and the stored material is same. So in that particular case, we are really interested that the sport should be minimum, because I have to remove that sport with the EDM wire cut. So we using it that way. How much temperature a banana fiber material can endure? Okay. Specifically for a banana fiber, we are not working with giving a direct heat to that material, but as a reinforcement into the polymer, what we observed that the results were quite good up to 200 degrees Celsius. Okay, then there is another question: how the sport structure is removed? Does we need the post processing in FDM? The sport structure is easily removed in FDM. What we are doing is we are having basically a chamber which is a ultrasonication based chamber. Basically, it consists of normally what we are having in our place. It has 5 transducer, 30 kilohertz output it is giving, and then we have a bath in which some water we put, and then we put some powder to have a pH value around 10, right? So and the temperature control is there for the normally thermoplastic material that we are using. The material is getting dissolved at that temperature and at the pH value of around 10. Normally in 30 minutes we are able to dissolve our whole sport for a part which may be around 6 inch long, or you can say the 6 square inch area. We can 6 by 6 square inch we can move that. So basically the ultrasonic cleaning and temperature and the pH value, these are responsible for dissolving this. Okay, any other? Okay. So Friends, if there are no more queries, we will like to really thank you for your patient hearing. Now there will be another session at 12, which will be taken care by Professor Arun Anand, who will be specifically talking about the use of this 3D printing in veterinary dentistry. He is a very renowned surgeon, very distinguished professor in this area, and using this particular type of material for dental application in case of the zoo animals, wild animals, and of course the domestic animals. So thank you very much. Thanks all.